COVID-19 has disrupted learning for 2020 across the world. The Zero Dropout campaign says school closures will expose girls especially to exploitation. It says when girls are not in school, they are under pressure to take more responsibility at home. Let's talk some more about this now with the program director of the campaign, Merle Mansfield, joins us now via Skype from Cape Town. Merle, thank you so much for joining us. This is a conversation that's been going on for some time now, even before we'd ever heard of this thing called COVID-19, that putting an emphasis on the education of our girls will have a large-scale and positive impact on changing the lives of so many generations going forward. But COVID-19 has put a different light on that very important factor, hasn't it? In that your campaign has held true that if we keep kids out of school for too long, there's a large number of them that might never find your way back. But for girls, even more so. Tell us what your thinking is around that.
Good morning, Marcelle, and thank you for having us. Indeed, you know, the risks for children being out of school is definitely high in terms of them being able to find their way back to the school system. But for girls, and especially in our country, if we think about the kind of scourge of gender-based violence that we face, and the number of girl children that we often report on as being abducted, murdered, raped, you know, the vulnerabilities of girl children are extremely high, especially when they are unable to be in the school space. What we do know is often our school spaces serve as the first kind of place where we recognize that something might be wrong. So in order for us to help a girl child, you know, to be able to assess that and to be able to identify that. And second to that, we know from research that in global epidemics or where there is economic crisis and it impacts the households, a lot of the care burden falls to girl children. So that means, you know, taking care of younger children or taking care of the sick often becomes the responsibility of a girl child. And thus makes it even harder for a girl child in a home situation to continue staying connected to school life while navigating those kinds of responsibilities as well.
I come from a family of teachers, and I know that over the many, many years of hearing all the stories that family members come home with as teachers in different types of communities, the big talking point was always, firstly, about the importance of nutrition, especially children coming from at-risk and vulnerable communities, but also schools often being the only safe space for children coming from at-risk family environments or even broken family environments as well. With lockdown, taking kids out of what could be their only safe space, that brings with it, as you mentioned there, a further danger that they've just run out of places to feel safe in and people to speak to who will hear them.
Absolutely. And if, you know, if we look at the very big crisis of sexual violence within our country, often we find that the perpetrators of sexual violence against girl children are not strangers. They are known to them. They are community members. They are neighbors. They are family members. And so the access to girl children while they are not able to be in school is, you know, higher. They are vulnerable because they're exposed to these, you know, perpetrators within their communities very often. And teachers often serve as that very first line of defense for many girl children and for many children, you know, who notice that a girl child is exhibiting, you know, symptoms or, you know, characteristics that indicate they are at risk and they are in need of help, and we can identify them and we can assist them. But more than that, I think that the access to schools allow children and girls in particular to exercise agency and opportunity. And if you know that agency is limited within your home because there's a different expectation of you, you know, the engagement with school definitely does lower and the risk for dropout then spikes. And so the issue of, you know, being able to contain our children in such a way that we can stay connected with them and they're willing to return when schools reopen is a very big issue that we are not talking about in South Africa. And then obviously you know, the very real statistics around what happens around global crises when children are out of school and the increase in adolescent pregnancies around those times. And definitely the impact of that is way harder felt for girl children than for boys. Girl children cannot return to school. Girl children have, you know, missed or been lagging behind or missed out Many schools don't have reintegration programs for teenage pregnant mothers or for teenage mothers. Oh, and the support for teenage mothers in our country is also dismal. So if we think about all of those things and how it impacts girl children in terms of their education access, it is definitely a serious concern.
Now, a few months ago, when we again started speaking about your Zero Dropout campaign and the impact that COVID-19, the pandemic, would have on that, a few months ago, your organization had encouraged society and government especially to listen to the experiences of teachers as they started going back to school and try to get the school year going again. Listen to the experience of teachers during lockdown, establishing a task team inclusive of civil society to find solutions to the challenges being faced in trying to get schooling going. That was a few months ago. What has your organization learned from listening to those teachers and the experiences that we've heard coming from across the country, both from school goers as well as our teachers?
I think that it's challenging and that it's tough and that it's been hard to adapt and that people feel unsupported. And I think that one of the very difficult things is we've had an experience in the past couple of months of an education system talking to a lot of people and talking to the people that are implementing the work, but not with. And we called for this at the start of the pandemic because we knew that there isn't a timeline on COVID-19 and we're not sure when we will go back to normality or when we will return to normal. And so the issue of closing or opening schools isn't necessarily that important. It is about how are we navigating the space during this time to ensure that we are offering children the support they need, learners and teachers the support they need to be able to continue learning in this way. And second to that, how do we activate and engage communities and families to step in and support, a different model of education where, it doesn't just sit within the building, but education spans outside of that building. And I think that we have to get to a space where we're starting to have those conversations. We've also noticed that many of our learners who have managed to stay connected to somebody, so either one of our implementing partners as a mentor or who have a mentor or somebody who's supporting them, many of those learners have managed to continue learning, have managed to continue coming back to school, have managed to continue accessing psychosocial support, and so have a lesser risk of not returning to the school space, once all of this is over. But we also know that there are learners who have never been to school at all during this period of time and have no contact with school, have no access to distance learning, who have no material in their hands, who haven't spoken to anybody who's asked them anything about how they feel about school. And re-engaging those learners is going to be tough. And we need to start thinking about how are we going to reach them, first of all, find them, and start re-engaging them back into the school space and back into, just the system and routine of schooling after this very long period of time.
Such important points being made there. Thank you so much for your time this morning, and indeed we wish you everything of the best with your program. The program director for the Zero Dropout campaign, Merle Mansfield, joining us live there via Skype from Cape Town. So many challenges and threats to our children and those coming from especially vulnerable and at-risk communities, especially during this time.